Learning is not about memorizing facts, she told the audience of educators from 20 different worlds. Learning is about developing curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking skills. When students are encouraged to ask questions and explore ideas, they become better problem solvers and more innovative thinkers. In the audience, educational coordinator Beck Stahl nodded enthusiastically. She had become one of the strongest advocates for educational reform in the Zephyrian system. Schools throughout the Empire were reporting that students who learned through Lisa's methods showed increased motivation, better collaboration skills, and more creative approaches to problem solving. Near the food court, Danny Kim was busy coordinating what had become the largest fusion cuisine operation in the galaxy. His restaurant chain, Earth and Beyond, now operated on 15 different worlds. More importantly, his emphasis on food as a social experience had revolutionized dining culture throughout the Zephyrian Empire. Danny called Administrator Nexther, who had become Danny's business partner and best friend. The supply ship from Rigel Prime just arrived. They brought those spices you ordered. Perfect timing, Danny replied. We're going to need them for tomorrow's cooking demonstration. I think the delegates from the Andromeda sector are really going to enjoy learning about curry. Nexther had changed dramatically over the past year. He had learned to cook, laugh, and express his personal preferences. More significantly, he had become an advocate for worker happiness and well-being throughout the Zephyrian military. Ships that implemented his recreational and dining programs reported 50% less turnover and significantly improved morale. At the Technology Pavilion, Jake Thompson was demonstrating the latest improvements to Zephyrian ship design. His modifications had been so successful that he was now the official chief engineering consultant for the entire fleet. The beautiful thing about collaboration, Jake told a group of engineers from various worlds, is that everyone brings different perspectives and experiences. When we share knowledge instead of hoarding it, everybody benefits. Engineer Tokvan, who had become Jake's closest colleague, nodded in agreement. Jake's approach has not only improved our technology, but it has also improved our work environment. Engineers throughout the fleet are more engaged and more innovative than they have ever been. The Zephyrian Empire had quietly abandoned its conquest model 6 months ago. The costs had become prohibitive, and more importantly, the partnership model was proving far more profitable. Instead of stripping resources from conquered worlds, they were helping those worlds develop sustainable economies and receiving a percentage of the profits. Other alien civilizations had taken notice. The Altarian Federation had signed a partnership agreement with Earth 3 months ago. The Centauri Alliance was currently negotiating their own cultural exchange program. Even the mysterious vegan collective had sent diplomatic representatives to discuss potential collaboration. At the festival's information center, Carol White was coordinating the Galactic Storytelling Project. Children from dozens of worlds had contributed stories, legends, and myths from their cultures. These stories were being translated and shared across the galaxy, helping different species understand each other better. Stories are how we share our values and dreams, Carl explained to a group of visiting diplomats. When children from different worlds read each other's stories, they learned that despite our physical differences, we all want similar things: friendship, adventure, love, and belonging. Young Rixtel, who had become one of Carol's most enthusiastic students, was helping coordinate the children's storytelling circle. He had written several stories of his own, including one about a young Zephyrian who learns to appreciate art and music during a visit to Earth. Environmental consultant Kate Brown was presenting her latest success story to a packed amphitheater. The Kepler Restoration Project has exceeded all expectations, she announced. Not only have we successfully rehabilitated the damaged ecosystems, but the sustainable extraction methods are producing 30% more resources than the old. strip mining operations. The Kepler project had become a model for environmental restoration throughout the galaxy. Kate's team of human and alien scientists had developed techniques for healing damaged worlds while maintaining profitable resource extraction. Mining companies throughout the sector were requesting similar partnerships. Tech entrepreneur Alex Davis had perhaps achieved the most dramatic success of all. His galactic social network now connected billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Instead of promoting rebellion or chaos, it had become a force for peace and cooperation. When people can communicate freely and easily, Alex told a conference of galactic leaders, they build relationships. And when you have relationships with people, you don't want to hurt them. The network has prevented more conflicts than any military force ever could. Emperor Zixith himself had arrived on Earth for the festival. He now bore the title of Chief Partnership Officer for what was officially called the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. The change in title reflected the change in philosophy that had swept through his former empire. When we first came to Earth, he said during his keynote address, we thought we were bringing order to a chaotic world. Instead, we learned that what we called chaos was actually creativity, diversity, and innovation. The humans taught us that strength comes not from control, but from cooperation. As evening approached, Vextar found himself sitting on a bench with his old friend Lieutenant Zelenok, watching the sunset over the festival. Both of them now lived permanently on Earth. Vextar worked as a diplomatic liaison, while Zelenok had become a teacher at the Interspecies Academy. Do you ever miss the old days? Zelenok asked. Vextar considered the question. I miss the simplicity of it. Everything was clear and predictable. We had orders, we followed them, we accomplished our missions. But I never had friends. Back then, I never laughed or learned or discovered anything new. I never felt like I was part of something larger than myself. Around them, the festival continued into the night. Families from dozens of worlds shared picnic dinners on the grass. Musicians taught each other new songs. Children played games that combined rules from multiple planets. Look at that. Zelenok pointed to a group where human and Zephyrian teenagers were teaching Altarian youth how to play basketball while learning an Altarian strategy game in return. A year ago, those kids didn't even know other species existed, Vextar observed. Now they're best friends. The humans have a saying, Zelenok said. They say that home is not a place, it's where your family is. Vextar nodded. I understand. Now why we could never conquer them. You cannot conquer a people who respond to invasion by offering friendship. You cannot defeat a species whose first instinct is to ask how they can help you. As the festival wound down, volunteers from all species worked together to clean up the park. No one had been assigned to this task. It simply needed to be done, and people did it. Mrs. Patterson, Jake Thompson's elderly neighbor from Detroit, was directing a group of young Zephyrians in proper recycling techniques. That's right, dear, she said to a confused alien teenager. Aluminum cans go in the blue bin. Plastic bottles go in the green bin. Mrs. Patterson, the young Zephyrian asked, why do humans spend so much time taking care of things they do not own? Mrs. Patterson smiled. Because we all live here together, sweetie. If we take care of our planet takes care of us. And now that we're all friends, we take care of each other too. Vextar stood up from his bench and walked toward his small apartment in downtown Manhattan. Tomorrow, he would attend 3 committee meetings about expanding the partnership program to new sectors, review applications from 6 worlds requesting cultural exchange programs, and have lunch with the Andorian ambassador to discuss trade agreements. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic complexity that would have frustrated him a year ago. Now it felt like participating in something wonderful and important. As he walked through the quiet streets, Vexstar reflected on how completely wrong the Zephyrian Empire had been about conquest. They had thought strength meant imposing your will on others. They had believed that order required control and uniformity. The humans had shown them a different kind of strength, the power to build bridges instead of walls, to create cooperation instead of compliance, to turn enemies into allies through patience, kindness, and genuine care for others' well-being. The Zephyrian Empire had come to enslave Earth. Instead, they had learned what it meant to be free, to question, to create, to choose, to dream, and most importantly, to belong to a community that valued every individual contribution. They had tried to conquer humanity. But in the end, humanity had conquered them with something far more powerful than any weapon. The simple recognition that everyone, no matter how different, deserved friendship, respect, and the chance to be part of something beautiful. And perhaps that was the most human victory of all. Danny grinned. I could help you write the proposal, and maybe develop some recipes that would work in ship kitchens. You would do that? Of course, food should make people happy. If I can help your crews be happier and healthier, why wouldn't I want to do that? Nexther had spent his entire career following regulations and maintaining efficiency. The idea that someone would volunteer their time and expertise just to help others was completely foreign to his experience. But the biggest change was happening in space itself. Zephyrian ships throughout the galaxy were reporting strange requests from their crews. Soldiers wanted art supplies and musical instruments. Engineers were asking for recreational activities during off-duty hours. Officers were requesting better communication systems so they could stay in touch with friends they had made on Earth. Captain Murtagh of the Starship Dominion submitted a formal report that confused everyone who read it. Request permission to establish cultural exchange program with Earth Colony New Brisbane. My crew has learned recreational activity called basketball and wishes to challenge human team to competitive match. Also requesting cookbook and ingredients for pizza, which has improved crew morale significantly. Similar reports were coming from across the Empire. Ships that had visited Earth were spreading human ideas faster than the High Command could control them. Environmental activist Kate Brown had somehow convinced 3 different Zephyrian engineering teams that their mining operations were wasteful and harmful. She had presented detailed plans for more efficient extraction methods that would actually increase productivity while protecting planetary ecosystems. The old way of strip mining entire continents is incredibly inefficient, she explained to mining coordinator Lexvar. You're destroying valuable resources that could be harvested sustainably for centuries. Plus, you're creating massive cleanup costs that eat into your profits. But our current methods are fast, Lexvar protested. Fast and expensive, Kate replied. My plan would take a little longer initially, but it would generate more resources over time with much lower costs. You'd also preserve the planets for future use instead of turning them into wastelands. She showed him detailed projections proving that sustainable mining would actually be more profitable in the long run. Lexvar had never considered the long-term economic benefits of environmental protection. Tech entrepreneur Alex Davis had created the biggest headache of all for the Zephyrian authorities. He had been working with alien scientists to improve their faster-than-light communication systems. His modifications had made Earth the most connected planet in the sector. But instead of using this advantage for military purposes, Alex had created something called the Galactic Social Network. Think about it, he explained to communications Director Veltar. You have soldiers stationed all over the galaxy who never get to talk to their families. You have scientists on different worlds working on similar problems who never share their research. You have cultural knowledge scattered across dozens of species that could benefit everyone. But unrestricted communication could be dangerous. Veltar pointed out, It could be used to organize rebellions or spread dangerous ideas. Or it could be used to share recipes, music, art, and friendship, Alex countered. Look at what's happened here on Earth. When people can communicate freely, they don't plot against each other. They help each other. The Galactic Social Network had already connected Zephyrian personnel on 17 different worlds. Instead of planning rebellions, they were sharing photos of their families, discussing their hobbies, and organizing virtual game tournaments. Emperor Zixith had called an emergency meeting of his High Council. The Earth situation was spiraling completely out of control. Your Majesty, reported military advisor Jen Call, our forces are requesting permanent assignment to Earth. Morale has never been higher, but they're adopting human customs and attitudes that are spreading throughout the fleet. What kind of customs? They're forming what they call friendships. They're pursuing individual interests during their free time. They're questioning orders and suggesting improvements to our procedures. Are they refusing to follow orders? No, sir. They're following orders enthusiastically. But they're also asking why we give those orders and whether there might be better ways to accomplish our goals. Supreme Admiral Kexmore delivered the most troubling report of all. Your Majesty, other conquered worlds are demanding the same treatment Earth receives. What do you mean? They want cultural exchange programs, environmental protection, worker safety standards, and educational opportunities. They've heard about Earth's partnership model, and they want it too. Partnership model? That's what the humans call it. Sir, they don't act like a conquered people. They act like business partners who are trying to help us succeed. Emperor Zixith stood up from his throne and walked to the window overlooking his capital city. Everything looked the same as it had for centuries. Orderly, efficient, predictable. But reports from across the galaxy suggested that this order was breaking down. Zephyrian citizens were beginning to ask questions they had never asked before. They wanted things they had never wanted before. They were imagining possibilities that had never existed before. Your Majesty, said his chief advisor Paul Rex, I believe we need to consider a strategic withdrawal from Earth. You mean admit defeat? I mean cut our losses before the situation gets any worse. Emperor Zixith turned back to his council. Prepare a message to Commander Vextar. Tell him to begin negotiating our withdrawal from Earth. What terms should we demand? Asked Admiral Kexmore. Emperor Zixith was quiet for a long moment. I suspect they're going to offer us something. Better than terms. They're going to offer us help. 1 year after the invasion that changed everything, Commander Vextar walked through Central Park in New York City. Around him, the first annual Galactic Cultural Exchange Festival was in full swing. The scene would have been impossible to imagine. When he first arrived on Earth, children from 6 different species played together on the playground. Food vendors sold everything from traditional Earth hot dogs to Zephyrian nutrition crystals to Altarian spice cakes. Musicians performed fusion concerts that blended instruments and melodies from across the galaxy. Vextar stopped at a booth where Pete Johnson was explaining sustainable farming techniques to a group of agricultural specialists from 4 different worlds. Pete's corn had become famous throughout the sector, and his farming methods were being adapted for use on dozens of planets. The key is working with the natural systems instead of fighting against them, Pete was saying. Every world has its own ecology. If you understand how that ecology works, you can grow more food with less effort and less environmental damage. A young scientist from the mining world of Kepler 442b raised her hand. Mr. Johnson, could these principles work on a planet where the soil has been heavily damaged by industrial operations? Absolutely, Pete replied. Soil can heal if you give it the right conditions. It might take a few seasons, but damaged land can become productive again. I've got some research data you might find interesting. Vextar smiled and continued walking. 6 months ago, Emperor Zixith had ordered him to negotiate a withdrawal from Earth. Instead, he had found himself negotiating something entirely different. The first interstellar partnership agreement in galactic history. The humans had refused to accept a Zephyrian withdrawal. Instead, they had proposed what they called Mutual Benefit Compact. The Zephyrian Empire would provide advanced technology and transportation capabilities. Earth would provide consultation services, cultural exchange programs, and what humans called quality of life improvements. It had sounded absurd when it was first proposed. Now, a year later, it was the most successful program in Zephyrian history. At the festival's main stage, Lisa Martinez was presenting the annual report on the Interspecies Education Initiative. Her teaching methods had been adapted for use in schools throughout the galaxy, and student performance had improved dramatically wherever they were implemented. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Calcith, "we've identified what appears to be a major resistance leader. A woman named Betty Davis in Baltimore has been organizing large meetings attended by hundreds of people." "Show me," Vextar ordered. The surveillance footage showed a community center filled with humans and Zephyrians, sitting around tables covered with fabric, thread, and colorful patches. "She's teaching our people to quilt," Calcith said in a bewildered voice. "To what?" "Quilting, sir. It's a human craft where they sew pieces of fabric together to make blankets. Apparently, it's considered relaxing and social. Our personnel report that it helps them cope with homesickness." Vextar watched as humans patiently showed Zephyrian soldiers how to cut fabric and make stitches. Everyone was laughing and talking. It looked more like a party than a military operation. "Sir," added Calcith, "Betty Davis has requested permission to establish quilting circles on our ships. She says our crew members need better recreational activities during long space voyages." "Our crew members asked for this?" "Enthusiastically, sir. They've also requested painting classes, book clubs, and something called movie nights." Commander Vextar realized that something unprecedented was happening. The humans weren't fighting the occupation. They were absorbing it. Every Zephyrian policy was being met with human suggestions for improvement. Every restriction was being circumvented by community cooperation. Every attempt at control was being transformed into an opportunity for cultural exchange. Worst of all, his own people were enjoying it. "Sir," Lieutenant Zelenok approached with yet another stack of papers. "We've received a petition signed by 30,000 humans and 800 Zephyrians. What do they want now?" "They're requesting permission to establish the first interspecies cultural exchange program. They want to organize regular festivals, educational exchanges, and collaborative art projects." Vextar looked at the petition, which included detailed plans, budget proposals, and scheduling recommendations. The humans had put more effort into planning this cultural program than most planets put into their entire defense systems. "They're not resisting us," he said quietly. "They're recruiting U.S." 6 months after the invasion, Emperor Zixith stood in his throne room on the Zephyrian home world, staring at the most disturbing financial report in the Empire's history. The Earth conquest was supposed to have paid for itself by now. Instead, it was draining the Imperial treasury at an alarming rate. "Explain these numbers," he demanded from his finance minister Dokron. "Your Majesty, the Earth operation requires constant support. We have sent 3 times the normal number of administrative personnel, plus additional supplies, equipment, and specialists." "Why?" "The humans generate enormous amounts of paperwork, sir. Every decision requires multiple forms, environmental assessments, safety reviews, and committee approvals. We have bureaucrats working around the clock just to process their requests, then stop processing the requests." "We tried that, Your Majesty." The humans responded by creating their own processing systems and submitting appeals through 17 different channels. They also started a letter-writing campaign to our home world, asking for better customer service. Emperor Zixith felt a headache coming on. Customer service? Yes, sir. They treat the occupation like a business relationship. They've submitted performance reviews for all our personnel, along with suggestions for improvement. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation had become even more complicated. What started as a standard conquest had evolved into something no one could properly define. In Detroit, Jake Thompson had revolutionized the Zephyrian repair facility. His suggestions had improved efficiency by 40%, reduced equipment, failures by 60%, and somehow made the workplace more enjoyable for everyone involved. Jake, said Engineer Tokvin, the High Command wants to implement your modifications on all ships throughout the fleet. That's great, Jake replied, but they should test them thoroughly first. Each ship probably has different requirements based on its age, mission, and crew size. You want to personally inspect every ship in the Zephyrian fleet? Well, not personally. But we could train teams of mechanics from different worlds, share knowledge and techniques, make the whole fleet more efficient and safer for everyone. Tokvin had never heard anyone suggest training mechanics from other worlds. In the Zephyrian system, each planet's workers stayed on their assigned planet and followed standardized procedures. Jake's idea of sharing knowledge across the entire empire was revolutionary. I could set up a training program, Jake continued enthusiastically. We could bring mechanics here to Earth, or I could travel to other worlds to teach them. Think how much we could learn from each other. The idea that a conquered human would want to travel to Zephyrian worlds to help them improve their technology was so strange that Tokvin had no idea how to respond. In Phoenix, Lisa Martinez was dealing with her own unexpected situation. Her classroom had become famous throughout the Zephyrian education system. Young aliens from across the galaxy were requesting transfers to study with her. Miss Martinez, said her supervisor, educational coordinator Beck Stahl, we have received applications from 47 different worlds. Everyone wants to learn about your teaching methods. I'm not doing anything special, Lisa insisted. I just treat the children as individuals and encourage them to think creatively. But that is exactly what makes it special. Zephyrian education has always focused on memorization and obedience. Your students ask questions we never taught them to ask. Lisa looked at her mixed classroom where human and alien children worked together on art projects. They were creating a mural showing what they imagined other planets might look like. Questions are good, she said. Questions mean they're thinking. They're curious about the world around them. Yes, but now their parents are asking questions. 2. Adult Zephyrians are requesting education courses. They want to learn about creativity, imagination, and self-expression. Would that be so bad? Lisa asked. Bextal was quiet for a moment. I do not know. These concepts did not exist in our society before we came to Earth. Meanwhile, Danny Kim's restaurant had become the unofficial headquarters for what humans were calling the Friendship Initiative. Every night, the place was packed with people from both species, sharing meals, stories, and ideas. Danny, said Administrator Nexter, I have been thinking about your suggestion regarding food variety on our ships. Which suggestion? Danny had made dozens of suggestions about improving Zephyrian nutrition and meal planning. You said that sharing meals brings people together. That eating is a social activity, not just a biological necessity. That's right. Food is about more than nutrition. It's about community, culture, and comfort. I want to propose this concept to the Fleet Command. Our long-distance crews suffer from loneliness and low morale. Perhaps better food and social dining could help. 3 months into the occupation, Commander Vexstar received an urgent report from Intelligence Officer Kalseth. The humans were organizing some kind of resistance movement, and it was spreading across the entire planet. Show me the evidence, Vexstar demanded. Kalseth pulled up surveillance footage on the main screen. This is Iowa, sir, The human Pete Johnson has refused direct orders to stop agricultural production. Despite our commands, he continues to plant and harvest crops. Vexstar watched the video of a middle-aged farmer driving a tractor across a field of corn. What threat does this pose to our operations? He's influencing others, sir. Farmers across the region are following his example. They claim the soil conditions are perfect this year, and they cannot waste the opportunity. Are they hoarding food, building weapons, training for combat? No, sir. They're sharing their crops with everyone, including our personnel. Farmer Johnson sent 3 bushels of corn to our regional headquarters with a note saying he hoped we would enjoy it. Vexstar rubbed his forehead. This is resistance? It gets worse, sir. In Portland, a human named Carol White is conducting what appear to be propaganda meetings disguised as children's entertainment. The screen showed a woman sitting in a circle with 20 children, holding a colorful book. Her voice carried clearly through the surveillance equipment. Once upon a time, Carl was reading, there was a little dragon who was afraid of fire. All the other dragons could breathe flames, but whenever this dragon tried, only flowers came out of his mouth. The children giggled and asked questions about the flower dragon. Several young Zephyrians sat in the circle, listening with fascination. What kind of propaganda is this? Vexstar asked. We're not certain, sir. Our analysts have studied hundreds of these stories and cannot determine their military purpose. They seem to be about friendship, imagination, and something called believing in yourself. Are they teaching humans to fight us? No, sir. Yesterday, she read a story about 2 different species who became friends after learning to understand each other. Our junior officers who attended the session said it was nice and asked if they could borrow the book. Intelligence reports kept coming in from around the world. In Los Angeles, humans had organized carpooling networks to share transportation despite restrictions on movement between cities. In Chicago, they had created community gardens in vacant lots. In Miami, they had started a beach cleanup program that included Zephyrian volunteers. Sir, reported communications specialist Yexnara, we're intercepting massive amounts of human communication, but none of it appears to be military coordination. What are they discussing? Vexstar asked. Mostly they're organizing social events. Potluck dinners, book clubs, music festivals, and something called game nights. They've invited our personnel to participate in many of these activities. Administrator Kethsa entered the command center looking exhausted. Commander, I need to speak with you about our enforcement policies. What's the problem now? We tried to shut down an unauthorized factory in Detroit yesterday. The workers were continuing production without proper permits. Good. We need to maintain order. The humans responded by organizing a neighborhood barbecue to support the unemployed workers. They raised enough money to help them pay their bills until they find new jobs. Then they invited our enforcement team to join the barbecue. Vexstar stared at her. They invited our enforcement team to a party? Yes, sir, Sergeant Mokhtar said. The hamburgers were excellent. He's asked for the recipe. Did our people attend this barbecue? 12 of our officers participated, sir. They helped serve food and learned several human games. Officer Pexival volunteered to help organize next week's event. Across the planet, similar incidents were occurring everywhere the Zephyrians tried to tighten their control. When they restricted internet access, humans started a letter-writing campaign that generated millions of physical letters. When they tried to control food distribution, humans organized community kitchens that prepared meals for anyone who was hungry, including homesick Zephyrian soldiers in Seattle. Danny Kim had turned his small restaurant into an unofficial cultural center. Every evening, humans and Zephyrians gathered there to share meals and stories. Danny had learned to prepare several Zephyrian dishes, while his alien customers had become experts on Korean barbecue. "Danny," said Lieutenant Velenak one evening, "my family back home would not believe how good this food tastes. We never had anything like this variety on our ships. Would you like me to teach you how to cook some of these dishes?" Danny offered. "Then you could make them for your friends." Lieutenant Velenak's eyes widened. "You would teach me your cooking secrets?" "They're not secrets," Danny laughed. "Food is meant to be shared. The more people who know how to cook good food, the better everyone eats." This concept amazed Velenak. In Zephyrian society, specialized knowledge was carefully guarded. Sharing professional skills with outsiders was unthinkable. But Danny seemed genuinely happy to teach anyone who wanted to learn. Meanwhile, Pete Johnson's farm in Iowa had become a gathering place for both species. Humans came to help with the harvest, and Zephyrian workers stopped by during their breaks to watch the farming operations. "How do you know which plants will grow well together?" asked agricultural specialist Cortell. Pete showed him how companion planting worked. "See, the corn provides support for the beans to climb. The beans add nitrogen to the soil that the corn needs, and the squash spreads out at the bottom to keep weeds away and retain moisture. This is much more efficient than our hydroponic systems," Cortall admitted. "Could this method work on other planets?" "I don't see why not," Pete said. "Every place has its own soil and climate, but the basic principles are the same. Plants like to help each other grow." Cortall had spent his entire career designing sterile growing facilities where each plant was isolated in its own container. The idea that plants could actually benefit from being close to each other challenged everything he had been taught. In Portland, Carl White's storytelling sessions had evolved into something much larger. Parents, children, and Zephyrian families gathered twice a week to share stories from both cultures. "Miss Carroll," asked young Rixtel, "do you have any stories about space travel?" "I'm sure we can find some," Carroll replied. "But first, why don't you tell us a story from your home world? What tales did your parents tell you when you were very young?" Rixtel thought for a moment. "We do not have stories like yours. Our education consisted of learning facts and procedures. But surely your people have legends or myths? Stories about heroes or magical places?" "We have historical records," Rixtel said slowly. "But they are meant to convey information, not to entertain." Carl smiled gently. "Well, maybe it's time to start creating some new stories. What would you like your story to be about?" This question puzzled Rixtel deeply. He had never been asked what he wanted anything to be about. Choices were made by authorities based on logical analysis. Personal preferences were irrelevant, but as he listened to the human children create wild, imaginative tales about flying horses and talking trees, he began to wonder what it would be like to make up his own story. Back at headquarters, Commander Vikstar was reviewing the latest reports with growing confusion. According to all their intelligence, a massive resistance movement was operating across Earth. Millions of humans were participating in unauthorized activities, defying occupation orders, and organizing large gatherings. But none of these activities seemed designed to harm the Zephyrians. Instead, the humans appeared to be trying to include them in everything they did. 2 weeks after the surrender, Commander Vextar stood in what used to be the United Nations building in New York. The human leaders had signed all the papers. Earth officially belonged to the Zephyrian Empire now. Everything should have been running smoothly, but it was not running smoothly. "Commander," said Regional Administrator Kethsa, holding a thick stack of papers, "the humans have submitted 14,000 forms requesting information about our occupation policies." Vextar looked at the papers with confusion. "What kind of information?" "They want to know our environmental impact procedures. They're asking about worker safety standards. They need to see our permits for construction projects." and they want to schedule meetings to discuss proper waste disposal methods. Permits? Vextar had conquered dozens of worlds. No one had ever asked him for permits before. Yes, sir. Apparently. Humans have something called building codes and zoning laws. They say we cannot construct our administrative centers without proper approval from local committees. In Detroit, Jake Thompson had been assigned to work in the alien technology repair facility. The Zephyrians had taken over an old factory and filled it with their equipment. Jake was supposed to fix anything that broke down. The problem was that Jake could not stop himself from asking questions. "This power coupling looks inefficient," Jake told his Zephyrian supervisor, Engineer Tokvan. "Why don't you use a direct connection instead of routing the energy through all these extra components?" Tokvan looked nervous. "This is how we have always built our machines. It is the standard design." "But look," Jake said, pulling out a sketchpad. "If you reroute the power flow here and eliminate these 3 unnecessary steps, you could increase efficiency by at least 30%. You would also reduce the chance of overheating." "I cannot make changes to approved designs," Tokvan replied. "That would require approval from the Engineering Council on the home world." "How long does that take?" Jake asked. "Usually between 6 months and 2 years. Jake stared at him. 2 years? To approve a simple design improvement? That's crazy. Why don't you just test it on a small scale first? If it works better, then you can submit the paperwork." Tokvan had never met anyone who suggested testing improvements before getting official approval. On Zephyrian worlds, workers did exactly what they were told. They never offered suggestions or asked why things were done certain ways. But Jake was different. Every day he found new problems with Zephyrian technology and suggested ways to fix them. He was respectful and friendly about it, but he never stopped asking questions. In Phoenix, Lisa Martinez was supposed to teach human culture to young Zephyrians who had come to Earth with their parents. The alien children were polite and intelligent, but they had never experienced anything like a human classroom. "Today, we're going to talk about creativity," Lisa announced to her mixed class of human and Zephyrian children. A young Zephyrian named Rixdal raised his hand. "Teacher Martinez, what is creativity?" Lisa smiled. "Creativity is when you use your imagination to make something new, something that has never existed before." The Zephyrian children looked confused. "But why would we make something new?" asked another student, Velara. "The old things work perfectly well." 8-year-old Kevin Brown raised his hand. "Because making new things is fun. Yesterday, I drew a picture of a purple elephant that could fly. Purple elephants don't exist, but I made one anyway." "But that is not logical," Rixdal said. "Elephants cannot fly. Their bodies are too heavy. And purple elephants serve no useful purpose." "They don't have to serve a purpose," explained Maria Gonzalez. "They just have to be cool." The Zephyrian children had never heard the concept of doing something just because it was cool. On their world, everything had a specific purpose and function. Nothing was created without a logical reason. Lisa realized she was accidentally teaching the alien children to think in ways their parents had never imagined. In Seattle, Danny Kim had been assigned to cook food for the Zephyrian workers at the local administrative center. This should have been simple, but Danny treated every meal like a puzzle to solve. "Do you have any food allergies?" he asked Administrator Nexter on the first day. Food allergies? Nexter had never heard this term. "Some people cannot eat certain foods because it makes them sick," Danny explained. "Humans can be allergic to nuts, dairy, shellfish, and many other things. I need to know what foods might hurt you so I can avoid them." Nexter was stunned. No one had ever asked him about his dietary needs before. In the Zephyrian military, everyone ate the same standard nutrition blocks. The idea that someone might customize food for his specific needs was completely foreign. I do not know, Nexter admitted. We have never tested for such things. No problem, Danny said cheerfully. We'll start with something simple and safe. How about rice and steamed vegetables? If that works well, we can try other things. The next day, Danny brought a small portion of rice and vegetables to Nexter's office. Try this, he said. If you like it, I'll make more. If you don't like it, tell me what you would prefer. Nexter tasted the food carefully. It was unlike anything he had ever eaten. The vegetables had different textures and flavors. The rice was soft and warm. Most surprising of all, it actually tasted good. This is acceptable, he said, trying to hide his enthusiasm. Just acceptable? Danny asked. What would make it better? More salt? Different vegetables? A sauce? No one had ever asked Nexter what would make anything better. He was a mid-level administrator. His job was to follow orders and implement policies. His personal preferences were irrelevant, but Danny kept asking. Every day he brought different foods and asked for feedback. Soon Nexter found himself looking forward to meals and thinking about flavors and textures he had never noticed before. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian High Command was growing frustrated with reports from Earth. Every other conquered planet had been fully operational within 1 month. Earth was taking much longer. What is the delay? Demanded Supreme Admiral Kexmore during a video conference with Commander Vextar. The humans are very thorough, Vextar replied carefully. They want to discuss every detail of every policy. They form committees to study our procedures. They ask questions about everything. Then stop answering their questions, Admiral. Kexmore said. Tell them to follow orders. We tried that, sir. They formed more committees to discuss why we would not answer their questions. Then they submitted formal complaints about lack of communication. Now they want to schedule meetings to improve our communication protocols. Admiral Kexmore was silent for a moment. How many meetings? Last week, they requested 437 different meetings, sir. They want to discuss everything from worker safety to environmental protection to cultural exchange programs. Cultural exchange programs? Yes, sir. They want to teach our people about human art, music, and literature. They also want to learn about our culture. They have created something called a Sister Planet program and asked if any Zephyrian worlds would like to participate. On his home world, Admiral Kexmore looked at a report showing the costs of the Earth occupation. They were 10 times higher than any previous conquest. Worse, the humans were influencing Zephyrian workers in unexpected ways. Engineer Tokvan had submitted a request to test 17 different design improvements suggested by Jake Thompson. Regional Administrator Kethsa had asked for training in something called conflict resolution after watching how humans handled disagreements. Food Service Coordinator Nexter had requested permission to establish culturally appropriate dining facilities on all Zephyrian ships. Most disturbing of all, young Zephyrians who had been exposed to human children were beginning to ask questions their parents could not answer. Questions like, why do we do things this way? And what if we tried something different? Commander Vextar, Admiral Kexmore, said slowly, I am sending additional administrative support to Earth. You will receive 50 more bureaucrats to help process human requests and forms. Thank you, sir, Vextar replied, though he suspected 50 bureaucrats would not be nearly enough. After the call ended, Vextar walked to his window and looked down at the city below. New York was busier than ever. Humans and Zephyrians walked the streets together. Food trucks served fusion cuisine that combined Earth and alien ingredients. Street musicians played songs that included Zephyrian instruments. Looked less like an occupied city and more like a cultural festival. His aide, Lieutenant Zelenok, approached with another stack of papers. "Sir, we have received 600 new requests today." "What kind of requests?" Vexstar asked wearily. "The humans want to know if we would like to participate in something called Earth Day. They are planning environmental cleanup activities and think we might be interested in learning about sustainability practices." Vexstar stared at the papers. Somewhere in his military training, there should have been a chapter about what to do when the people you conquered started inviting you to their holidays. He was beginning to suspect that no such chapter existed. Commander Vexstar stood on the bridge of his massive ship and looked at the blue planet below. Earth looked so small and peaceful from space. White clouds moved slowly across green and brown land. The oceans sparkled like jewels in the sunlight. "This will be easy," Vexstar said to his second officer, Kefsa. "The humans are weak. They fight each other all the time. They have no real weapons that can hurt us." Kefsa nodded and checked her data pad. "Our scouts watched their television signals for 5 years. The humans spend most of their time arguing about silly things. They worry about what clothes to wear and what food to eat. They are not warriors like us." The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 planets in the last century. Each time, it was the same story. They arrived with their big ships. The local people saw their superior technology. The leaders surrendered quickly. Within a few months, the Zephyrians would strip the planet of its valuable resources and move the people to work camps. Earth would be no different down on Earth. Jake Thompson wiped grease from his hands with an old rag. His small auto repair shop in Detroit was busy today. 3 cars waited outside, and 2 more were scheduled for the afternoon. Jake had been fixing cars for 15 years. He was good at it and enjoyed the work. "Hey, Jake," called his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, from across the street. "Did you see those weird lights in the sky last night?" Jake looked up from the engine he was working on. "Yeah, I saw them too. Probably just airplanes or something. Maybe the military is testing new equipment." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "They were too big to be airplanes, and they moved too slowly. My grandson thinks they might be from outer space." Jake laughed. "Your grandson watches too many science fiction movies, Mrs. Patterson. There's probably a simple explanation." 3,000 miles away in Phoenix, Lisa Martinez was setting up her classroom for another day of teaching. She arranged 20 small desks in neat rows and put fresh crayons in each desk. Her 3rd grade students would arrive in an hour. Lisa loved working with children. They asked interesting questions and saw the world in ways that surprised her. Today they would learn about different countries and cultures around the world. She had pictures from Japan, Brazil, Kenya, and many other places. Miss Martinez. Her teaching assistant, Betty Clark, rushed into the classroom. "Have you been watching the news? There are strange ships all over the world." Lisa looked confused. "Ships? What kind of ships?" "Flying ships, huge ones. They're just sitting in the sky above every major city. The president is going to make an announcement in an hour." In Seattle, Danny Kim was preparing for the lunch rush at his small restaurant. He had been cooking Korean food for 10 years, but he also made burgers, tacos, and pasta. His customers came from all over the neighborhood. They were construction workers, office employees, students, and families. Danny took pride in his cooking. He used fresh ingredients and made everything from scratch. His kimchi was famous throughout the area, and people often brought their friends to try it. His wife, Susan, came running from the front of the restaurant. "Danny, you need to see this. There are giant spaceships everywhere." Danny put down his knife and followed Susan to the front window. Above the Seattle skyline, a massive dark shape blocked out part of the sun. It was bigger than any building in the city. Other smaller ships floated around it like birds. "What is that thing?" Danny asked Dot before Susan could answer. every television, and radio in the city began broadcasting the same message. The voice was clear and spoke perfect English, but it sounded strange, too formal and precise. "People of Earth," the voice said, "we are the Zephyrian Empire. We have come to bring order to your chaotic world. Your leaders have already been contacted. They will surrender your planet to us within 48 hours. Do not be afraid. If you cooperate, you will be treated fairly. Resistance is useless. We are far more advanced than you. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. Commander Vextar smiled as he watched the broadcast systems of Earth carry his message to every corner of the planet. His technology experts had easily taken control of all human communication networks. The humans could not even send messages to each other without his permission. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Zelenok from his station, "we're receiving surrender offers from several world leaders already. The President of the United States wants to negotiate terms. The Prime Minister of England is asking about peaceful transition. Procedures. Excellent," Vextar said. "This is proceeding exactly as planned. Have the diplomatic team prepare the standard occupation contracts. We should have complete control within 2 days." Kethsa looked at her scanner readings. "Sir, I'm detecting some unusual communication patterns from the planet's surface." "What kind of patterns?" Vextar asked. "The humans are talking to each other much more than usual. Their internet systems are carrying millions of extra messages. Most of them seem to be asking questions." Vextar shrugged. "They are probably afraid. Fear makes primitive species communicate more. It will pass once they accept their new situation. But down on Earth, the conversations were not about fear. They were about curiosity." Jake Thompson had closed his repair shop and joined a crowd of neighbors in the street. Everyone was looking up at the ship and talking. "I wonder what kind of fuel they use," Jake said. "Those ships must be incredibly heavy. How do they stay in the air?" "Maybe they use some kind of magnetic system," suggested Mr. Rodriguez from a hardware store. "Or maybe they figured out how to control gravity." "Do you think they need mechanics?" asked Jake. "I mean, if they have ships, they must have engines. Engines break down. Somebody has to fix them." Lisa Martinez had gathered her students in the classroom, despite the announcement that schools were closing. The children were excited rather than scared. "Miss Martinez," asked 8-year-old Kevin Brown, "do you think the aliens have children too? Do their kids go to school? Do they celebrate birthdays?" Added Maria Gonzalez, "What kind of cake do they eat?" "I want to know if they have pets," said Timothy Jones. "Maybe they have space dogs." Lisa found herself genuinely curious about these questions. If these aliens were real, they must have families and cultures, just like humans did. What were their lives like? What did they believe in? What made them happy or sad? At Danny Kim's restaurant, the lunch crowd had turned into an impromptu community meeting. Instead of ordering food, people were sitting around tables and discussing a situation. "Somebody should ask them if they're hungry," Danny said. "I bet they've been traveling for a long time. Space travel probably works up an appetite." "Do you think they can eat human food?" asked Dr. Hellenreich from the medical clinic next door. "Their digestive systems might be completely different." "Only one way to find out," Danny replied. "Maybe I should cook something and take it to them. Something mild that won't upset their stomachs. Maybe some rice and vegetables." Back on the command ship, Vextar was beginning to feel slightly puzzled. The humans were responding to the invasion, but not in the way his textbooks described. According to Zephyrian military science, conquered peoples went through predictable stages: shock, fear, anger, despair, and finally acceptance. The humans seemed to have skipped most of these stages and jumped straight to curiosity. "Sir," Lieutenant Zelenok reported. We're receiving thousands of messages from the planet's surface. Surrender offers? Vexstar asked hopefully. No, sir. They're questions. The humans want to know where we come from, how our ships work, weather. We need help with anything, and if we want to attend something called a welcome party. Vexstar stared at the screen showing message after message scrolling past. This was not in any of his training manuals. Maybe conquering Earth would be more complicated than he thought.